uses words like the promised land? And why would he call this particular speech the mountaintop speech? Why do you think he would use it? Yes?
Maybe it's some kind of biblical meaning that people of the Israelites wanted to make it to the promised land.
Okay, so he's equating. Now, I want to be real clear that Dr. King, Reverend Dr. King, right, is staying on message, right? His profession is that he's a reverend. So obviously, he would take that struggle that the children of Israel were having and apply that in his profession, right? So this is his profession. And so he does exactly that. He compares the civil rights struggle with that of the children of Israel in their exodus from Egypt. And many of us have seen the Charlton Heston movie, right? Right around Easter time, they always, let my people go, all that kind of stuff. Out of that cold, dead hand. Oh, no, that's the NRA speech. I get right? So he uses this metaphor, if you will, and he also compares himself. If we follow that metaphor, then he must be what character in that metaphor? Moses, right? And like Moses, Moses was not able to enter into the promised land, neither would Dr. King, but he makes a promise that the people will. Now, the interesting thing is that the children of Israel, they lose Moses. Moses has been good to them. He got them out of the promised land, out of the talons of Pharaoh, and now they're on the brink of going into what was known as the promised land for them. And so they send in a couple of spies. And they send in 2 teams of spies. And they come back with 2 different reports. So one team goes out, Joshua and Caleb, and they say, oh my goodness, it's everything that was promised to us. There's milk and honey flowing. There's, grapes the size of a man's hand. Let's do it. And then the other team comes back and says, yes, there are grapes the size of a man's hand, and there is milk and honey, but there are also monsters and giants in the land. And so the people, being optimistic, decide to go with whom? The people with the good report. So they say, all right, we can go in there and we can fight these monsters and we can do this stuff and get all the stuff that belongs to us because we deserve it and it belongs to us. Yes. But in these battles, they start getting tired and weary. And they start complaining to Joshua and Caleb, when Moses was here, we didn't have to fight any monsters. When Moses was here, we would just he would send bread from heaven. When Moses was here, we blah, 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 blah. So they were constantly complaining to Joshua and Caleb. And so with this leadership challenge, what do you think Joshua and Caleb had to do to really help the people? What do you think he did? What did they have to do? They had to remind the people that Moses is dead. The way Moses used to do stuff is not how we're going to do it because I'm not Moses. All too often our society and our communities are looking for another Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. His DNA was very unique for the time that it was needed. The universe said, I need somebody who can, ... So they put together all of his DNA and all of his stuff, and bam, there was Martin. Will there be another Teresa, Mother Teresa? No, there will never be another Mother Teresa. There will never be another Gandhi. All of their DNA was unique for the time that they were called to be here. Will there be another you? Your DNA is unique for the time that you're called to be here. We eat cereal pretty much the same way that Gandhi would eat and that Dr. King would eat and that Mother Teresa would eat. We're born very similarly and we exit all the same way. So what are we going to do with the time that we have? Extraordinary people are called on at extraordinary times. And every day of our lives is an extraordinary time. Our ability to help or hurt someone is in our mouths and in our hands. So we're going to talk about how do we equip our minds and our hearts and our hands to become more effective in helping people. All right? Cool. So we'll start. You guys are so quiet. Oh, I have to take off the blinder. Okay. So I'll make this PowerPoint available to you. I don't want to bore you or insult you with all of the purposes and goals and all that kind of stuff. You can read that for yourself. So we'll get, and our time is limited, so we'll get to the good stuff. I do want to talk a little bit about the foundation of the ability that we have to even have a diversity conversation, right? So one of my favorite countries in the world is Sweden. And Sweden in 2001, they signed their first, what we would call, civil rights bill. 2001. They didn't have anything before then because they have all these immigrants coming out of all sorts of places into Sweden. So 2001. We have a better history on human rights and civil rights than that, right? So we start with the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, and they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, the right of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? We know that. That's part of what is true about us. And we also know that when they say men, we can now say mankind. Right? We understand that can be mankind. And so we start off with the Declaration of Independence. We then go to the Constitution. And then we jump to 1865, the 13th Amendment that abolished slavery. Yay! Right? So we got rid of slavery, which is an ironic thing, so we'll come back to that too. All right? And then the Women's Voting Act happens in 1920. Woo, women! Right? And then 1964, the Civil Rights Act. So for 100 years, people have been free, but couldn't do jack. But so in 1964, we have the Civil Rights Act, and then I have a typo here. It's the 1991 ADA Act that allows all of us to hit the handicap button and have all doors open for us. I really appreciate that. That's very handy. And so in the business, when I was at the county, I was their affirmative action officer, their diversity trainer, their cultural coordinator, if you will. And so one of the things that I focused on was discrimination. And so part of my job, people would have complaints, mostly around the time that reviews were going to be done, but they would have complaints, and so I would look at their complaints in two different ways. One, all of their complaints revolved around discrimination, and then the two aspects of discrimination. One is retaliation, where an employer retaliates against an individual who is like a whistleblower or a person who's causing trouble, blah, 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 blah. So I would investigate that. I would also investigate different forms of harassment, which would range from race or gender or ethnic origin, gender or sexuality or sexual orientation, religious or non-religious bias, age and classism, and disabilities, both short-term and long-term. So like technically, a pregnancy is a short-term disability, right? You have somebody living inside of you. I'm disabled too, you know. All right. So that's all this stuff. So this is all law stuff. This is all regulated, and there are consequences and negative things. There are books and laws and all sorts of stuff written about how we deal with this stuff. So discrimination is covered, right? But I want to ask you a question. You don't have to raise your hand, but I want you to think about this question. People talk about the Constitution all the time. How many of us, don't answer this question, don't raise your hand, don't flinch, just sit still. How many of us have actually read the Constitution? Think about that, all right? Think about that. All right, so, and it's not a hard document. You can find Cliff Notes. For those of us who are older, we can find those yellow and black books with the lines on the side. You guys know what I'm okay, all right, cool. So, So I want to talk a little bit about our vocabulary, because one of the things that when I taught high school, my students, I really work with them on understanding vocabulary and the power of words, right? Because words are important. And so I found it very interesting that anytime they had any kind of difficulties with something or someone, it was always racist. Like, that was racist! No, you were an idiot. That wasn't racist. It was, and so we had to break that stuff down. And so I want to get a common language so that we can move forward with some understanding. And so first of all, what is bigotry or what is a bigot? What is bigotry or what is a bigot?
Archie Bunker.
Archie Bunker. Not many people are old enough to remember Archie Bunker, right? Most of you guys in here aren't. But can you tell us a little bit about Archie Bunker? What were some features or some characteristics of Archie Bunker?
He was flat out name calling just about everybody. He didn't like anybody.
He didn't like anybody. He would name call everybody. What else? Yes, ma'am.
He wasn't very smart.
He wasn't very smart. Okay. So he was a name caller. He wasn't very smart.
Anybody that was different from him.
Okay, he hated anybody that was different from him. Any other characteristics of Archie Bunker? Well, those things that you just described don't sound very flattering at all. Would you consider those flattering? No. But I find it interesting that Archie Bunker was in America's living rooms for over 15 years. The All in the Family show was on for 10 years, and then the Archie's Place was on for another 5 years. There were a number of Spur spin-off shows like The Jeffersons, which was the same Archie Bunker character, just in a different skin suit, right? And then all the shows that spun off of that. So why do you think, if that was not very flattering, why would Archie Bunker be in our American living rooms for over 15 years?
Well, it was like watching My Fair Lady after the women's movement. It was hysterical.
Okay, so part of it was hysterical. So we found Archie to be laughable, right? He was a ludicrous character. What else? Why else might he have been in our living rooms? Yes, ma'am.
I think, unfortunately, a lot of people could relate.
And some people could relate to him, right? I took a class in comedy. And yes, you can take a class in comedy, right? And one of the things that they taught us in the class is that there's two reasons that we laugh at people. The first reason that we laugh at people is because we think that they're smarter than us, right? So, for example, Gilligan's Island. The professor could make solar panels out of coconuts, but he couldn't make a boat to get them off the island, right? So we find that laughable. We also laugh at people who we think we're smarter than, right? And so in the case of Archie Bunker, most people thought that they were more sophisticated or smarter than he was. And I personally, I find the character, the time frame, absolutely amazing, because it was such a great satirical way for us to look at ourselves at that point in history, right? So Archie was on television for a long time. And he's been known as America's favorite bigot, right? Now, what would happen when what was his son-in-law's name?
Meathead.
Meathead. He would call him Meathead, right? So Archie would say these outlandish things, and Mike, the character, Mike would bring some real information to Archie. And he'd say, Arch, that's not how it is. Here's some statistics. Here's some information. Here's some data. And how would Archie respond to that information? Did he say, oh, thank you, Mike. I'm now enlightened. Right? He's telling him to shut up. He'd call him names. He'd say, oh, meathead. Oh, you dumb Pollock. Or, he'd say all these kinds of things because the information would not get through. So, I don't know if you've known bigots in your own life or just seen them on television, but one of the things that's really interesting about bigotry is that bigotry is not based on logic. It's not based on facts. It's not based on data. Bigots feel the way they do because they do. And they'll tell you flat out.